The seemingly happy family. The morning light filtered through the half-drawn curtains, wrapping the modest living room in a gentle golden haze. John Miller stood by the window, coffee mug in hand, watching the city slowly stir awake beyond the glass. Chicago's autumn air carried a chill, but the warmth inside their apartment was comforting, familiar, almost deceiving in its tranquility. In the kitchen, Linda busied herself with breakfast, glancing occasionally at the clock. Her movements were precise, almost mechanical, as she buttered toast and poured orange juice into Tommy's favorite dinosaur cup. Their son, barely 7, shuffled into the room in superhero pajamas, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He headed straight for John, climbing into his lap like he'd done since he was small enough to carry in one arm. "Morning, Dad," he mumbled, offering a sleepy smile. John ruffled Tommy's hair, the corners of his mouth lifting. These were the moments he treasured, the small rituals that made life feel solid and unbreakable. Breakfast passed in the easy silence of a family comfortable with routine. Linda asked about John's day at the firm, nodding but rarely meeting his eye. Tommy recited his plans for show and tell at school, his excitement filling any spaces the adults left empty. On the surface, the Millers were as ordinary as any family on the block. Hard-working parents, a clever, curious child, a home filled with laughter and the scent of brewing coffee. Yet John couldn't help noticing the way Linda's smile felt thin, forced at the edges, or how she stiffened when he tried to kiss her cheek before leaving for work. Maybe it's just the stress, he told himself, the bills piling up, Linda's long hours at the clinic, the ever-present worry about keeping everything afloat. He pushed the doubts aside. What family didn't have its tensions, its unspoken quarrels? Still, as he closed the front door behind him and stepped into the brisk hum of the city, a faint ache settled low in his chest, a feeling that something essential was slipping quietly out of reach. John shook it off, pasting on the smile he kept for coworkers and clients. He was a husband, a father, a good man. Every suspicion nested in his mind. He prided himself on being a man who trusted his wife. Still, there were moments when awkward silences sat between them at the kitchen table. Linda stopped asking about his day. She started coming home later, blaming it first on traffic, then on overtime, then just on how overwhelming everything felt. The little things were hardest to ignore. Where once she reached for his hand after putting Tommy to bed, now she moved away, murmuring something about a headache or chores yet to be done. Their bank account, once robust, dipped lower each month. Receipts for clothes and dinners John didn't remember. New credit cards opened in Linda's name. When he tried to talk about the budget, Linda's answers were clipped, her patience thinning like ice under pressure. "Don't you trust me?" she snapped one evening. As John tallied expenses at the dining room table, the question stung. Because somewhere deep down, he wondered if he truly did anymore. And then there was her family. Linda's mother called more often, a sharp, critical voice on speakerphone that never failed to remind John of his supposed shortcomings. "If only you made more, John. Linda's working herself to the bone, you know." The comments were always wrapped in fake concern, but their intent was clear. Some days, he'd find Linda in tense, whispered conversations with her sister behind closed doors, conversations that quickly went silent when he entered. The home that once felt like a sturdy haven slowly turned foreign. He could feel his own reflection blurring in the background, like he was becoming a guest in his own marriage. Yet, John kept up the routine. School runs, work, dinners at home, convincing himself that if he loved hard enough, worked long enough, things would right themselves. He tried to ignore the late-night texts that made Linda smile at her screen, or the way she angled her laptop away from his line of sight. But the sense of unease was impossible to shake. At night, lying awake long after Linda's soft snores filled the dark, John stared at the ceiling, wondering when the distance between them had started to widen, and if it could ever truly be bridged again. Invisible pressure lingered like unseen judges in the corners of their home. Sunday dinners with the in-laws became rituals of discomfort for John. The table was always crowded, the conversations tight and spark-laden. Linda's mother, with her perfect posture and sharp tongue, always found a way to poke holes in John's confidence. She'd make little jabs about his job performance, about the state of the car, about Linda's burden. "You know, Linda's always been the responsible one," her mother remarked once, spearing a piece of roast chicken. "It's no wonder she's the one staying late at work to keep this family afloat." John's jaw tightened, but he let it slide for Tommy's sake. The numbers were harder to ignore. John managed their accounts and couldn't help but notice the balance shrinking, despite his efforts to bring in more through side projects and overtime. Linda, for her part, dismissed it with a wave of her hand. "It's just the cost of living, John. Everyone struggles." Her words never failed to make him feel small, like whatever he did, it would never be enough. Alone in the shower, John sometimes caught himself muttering apologies. Apologies for being home late. Apologies for missing parent-teacher meetings. Apologies for existing in a way that seemed to inconvenience the people who were supposed to love him most. Where was the easy laughter, the spontaneous movie nights, the kisses in the hallway while Tommy played with Legos on the living room carpet? The good memories seemed pressed between the pages of an old family photo album, fading at the edges. Tommy started to notice the tension too. The boy lingered longer at bedtime, hugging John a little tighter, asking if everything was all right. And John always lied, because what else could he do? "It's all fine, sport. Dad's just a little tired, that's all." But it wasn't just tiredness. It was the slow suffocation of feeling outnumbered in his own home, the relentless suggestion, spoken and unspoken, that he simply wasn't enough. The love he once felt so sure of now seemed conditional, measured out in silent judgment and sideways glances. John woke up each day promising himself the envelope was gone. When he asked, Linda shrugged, barely looking up from her phone. "Must have thrown it away with the junk mail. Don't worry about it." The words hung in the air, too casual. Strange, he thought, but let it go. That week, the little oddities multiplied. Packages arrived at the door, clothing brands John had never seen before, 2 designer purses, a pair of running shoes in a size he knew weren't Linda's. The name on the tags was right, but the taste wasn't hers. Linda explained it away with a half laugh. "It's for the charity event next month, you know, donations and all that." Her tone was breezy, but her eyes wouldn't quite meet his. At night, while Linda showered, John experimented with something he'd always thought beneath him, curiosity bordering on suspicion. Her phone, usually face down, now followed her everywhere, even into the bathroom. She placed it screen side up beside her pillow as she slept, the charging cord forever looped around her wrist like a lifeline. One evening, after Linda fell asleep with the TV murmuring in the background, John glanced at her phone when it buzzed. Just a name, A. Moore, and a string of emojis. His breath caught in his chest. He locked the screen again, guilt burning through him like whiskey. He tried to reason with himself. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe this was what modern life looked like. Shared homes, private screens, secrets that could be forgiven in the morning. But then came the night Linda didn't come home until after midnight. She mumbled something about work drinks, a last-minute team meeting, but wouldn't look him in the eye as she hurried into the bathroom, slamming the door between them. Through the thin wood he heard the muffled click of her phone, another burst of laughter he wasn't invited to join. The next morning he found her receipts stuffed in her coat pocket, a restaurant he'd never heard of on the other side of town. 2 dinner entrees, 3 glasses of wine. She breezed past him in the kitchen, clutching a mug, her movements sharp and precise, a woman very much in control of her story. John stared at the receipt, keeping him awake even as Chicago's midnight drizzle tapped like an accusation at the bedroom window. He rehearsed what to say while brushing his teeth, practicing a calm he didn't feel. Linda was in the kitchen, her hair still damp from her evening shower, scrolling listlessly through her phone when John approached her. The heaviness in the air made everything seem louder. The hum of the refrigerator, the slow tick of the clock on the wall, even the faint scuff of Tommy's slippers in the hallway beyond. "Linda?" His voice trembled more than he'd intended. He forced a smile. "Can we talk for a minute?" She didn't look up. "Can it wait? I'm exhausted and there's a lot to do, John." "No," he said, firmer now. "I think we need to talk now." She set her phone down with a little too much force. "All right, what's so urgent?" He hesitated, letting the silence swell between them. The right words were hard to find. Softer questions felt dishonest, but blunt ones seemed cruel. Finally, he settled on a middle ground. I keep noticing things lately. You're gone a lot, and when you're home, you're somewhere else. Is everything all right between us?" Linda's lips tightened, a familiar defensiveness settling into her features. "Are you really asking me that now, after the day I've had?" "I'm not just asking now, Linda. I've been worrying about it all month." He reached for her hand, but she folded her arms instead. "You hardly talk to me anymore. There are receipts I don't recognize, messages from people I've never even heard of." Her eyes flashed. "So you're checking up on me now? Is that who you are, John? The jealous husband?" He recoiled, stung. "No, I'm just worried. I love you. I want to know if something's wrong, if I'm what? Cheating?" Linda's laugh was hard and sharp. "Unbelievable. Maybe if you spent less time tracking my every move and more time being the kind of man I need, we wouldn't be having this stupid conversation." The words cut deep. The house felt colder, quieter, like even the walls wanted to keep out of their quarrel. John moved through the motions in a fog, making Tommy's breakfast, checking his email, putting on a smile he knew didn't reach his eyes. Linda kept to herself, her face impassive, eyes glued to her phone as she ate a dry piece of toast. They hardly spoke, not even to coordinate Tommy's school drop-off, and for once, their silence felt dangerously close to surrender. Tommy, sensing the tension, watched both his parents with guarded eyes. He didn't ask his usual questions about dinosaurs or Star Wars. Instead, he simply asked if he could walk to school with his friend Ethan, "So you and Mom can talk." The boy was perceptive, too much so for John's liking. John watched Linda pack her purse with mechanical calm, her movements brisk and methodical. She left without a kiss, just a thin bye tossed over her shoulder, the door closing behind her like a final word. He stood in the empty hallway for a long moment, his heart pounding, before exhaling into the silence. At work, John's mind wandered. Meetings blurred together. He caught himself staring out the window at the city, wondering if it was all slipping through his fingers. A word, a gesture, another unspoken grudge. Even his co-workers noticed, asking if everything was all right. He lied, of course. Just tired. Long week, he shrugged, though it was only Tuesday. When he came home that evening, the apartment was neat but cold, like a hotel room after checkout. Linda wasn't home yet, but she'd left a note on the fridge about a late meeting. There was no warmth in her handwriting. It was short, almost businesslike. He sat at the dinner table with Tommy, finishing the reheated casserole in silence, punctuated only by the clink of forks against plates. After Tommy went to bed, John lingered in the living room, immersed in a growing sense of displacement. He caught his own reflection in the blank TV screen. Tired eyes, hunched shoulders, worry lines he hadn't noticed before. The ordinary routines, the ones that once made him feel secure, now seemed empty, like echoes of a life to be heard. The turning point. The weeks passed, but nothing healed. The facade that held John and Linda together now felt as fragile as frosted glass, one harsh word or careless glance away from shattering entirely. Evening by evening, John became more acquainted with loneliness, sitting in the living room long after Tommy went to bed, listening to the distant footsteps of a wife who had become a stranger. It was on a Saturday morning, a rare day off work, that a change forced itself upon the household. John awoke to the smell of fresh coffee. Linda was up early. Surprised, hopeful, he padded into the kitchen to find her standing at the sink, staring out at the gray city street. Her posture was rigid, her coffee untouched. "Morning," he tried, voice tentative. She didn't turn around. "Morning." He waited, but nothing more came. John wanted to bridge the distance. He sat across from her, watching a shaft of weak sunlight slide across the kitchen floor. "Linda, we can't keep ignoring this. Something has to change." Still, she said nothing, but her hand, holding the mug, trembled. "Please," he whispered, "you don't have to carry everything alone." She looked at him then, really looked at him, with red-rimmed eyes. All the anger and pride, the walls they'd both maintained, flickered for a moment, replaced by exhaustion and something that looked almost like fear. "I don't even know where to start, John," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just talk to me. I'm right here." Linda set her cup down, pressing her palms to the table as if bracing herself. "It's not just you. I've been overwhelmed. At work, at home. There are things I haven't told you, and I'm not proud of them." John's heartbeat thudded, but he steeled himself. "Linda, I'd rather hear the truth, even if it hurts, than just keep living like this." A tear slid down her cheek. She wiped it away, staring at the tabletop. "I let things go too far. I thought if I worked harder, made more, maybe I could fix things, carry us through. But I can't. I'm drowning, John. And I kept the truth from you because I didn't a flicker of hope, a fragile, stubborn hope that maybe, just maybe, if they could be honest with each other, something new might grow from what was broken." Honest shadows. Sunday arrived with a quiet gray sky, the kind that pressed low over the city and pushed everyone inside. John found himself wide awake before dawn, tangled in thoughts that wouldn't settle. When the sun finally slipped over the rooftops, he sat, wrapped in an old knit sweater, staring out the window as mist rolled off the pines behind their apartment. Linda moved about the house in silence. The air between them was tender now, as if direct sound might crack the fragile truce they'd found in the kitchen the day before. Tommy watched them with silent curiosity, sensing, in his child's way, that something had shifted, though he couldn't say how. They ate breakfast together, halting and awkward, but together. A minor miracle, John thought. He tried a joke about Tommy's bedhead, and to his surprise, Linda laughed. The sound was softer, smaller than before, but it lingered in the room, the way sunlight sometimes manages after a storm. John felt something uncertain but real begin to stir inside him. But honesty was a habit neither of them was used to, and after breakfast, Linda lingered in the living room, arms crossed, staring at the old family photos above the mantel. John joined her, reluctant but determined. "Linda," he said quietly. "I meant what I said yesterday. I'm here. You don't have to hide." She hesitated, then let out a shaky breath. "I don't know if I can lay it all out at once." "We can take it slow," John offered. "One step at a time." Linda studied his face. She looked almost scared, as if the truth might open a hole so deep neither of them would climb out, but she nodded. There was courage in her eyes. So she started, not with confessions of love or regret, but with smaller things, the stress at work, the mounting deadlines, the way she felt more like a machine than a person. She talked about her parents' pressure, the exhaustion, the secret nights spent sitting in parking lots, wishing she could just drive and never look back. John admitted his own fears, the resentment he felt sharpening slowly over months, yet told. Wounds not yet healed. But honesty had cracked open a door, and on the other side, John sensed possibility. He didn't know where the road would lead or whether they would walk it together or apart, but for the first time in months, the silence in their home was full of hope instead of fear. The weight of choices. Monday returned the city to its usual hum, cars honking, distant voices on the sidewalk, the elevator rattling as it climbed past their floor. For John, the weekend's fragile honesty followed him everywhere. At work, he answered emails with unusual focus, but every so often, he caught himself staring at his phone, wondering how Linda was holding up. Linda had taken the day off. She'd said she needed time. Just a day to think, her voice trembling between relief and uncertainty. When John left that morning, she stood barefoot in the doorway, her arms wrapped tight around herself. It was the first time in years he'd seen her look so lost, so young. Throughout the day, memories flickered in John's mind. Her laughter when they danced in their tiny first apartment, the anxious hope in her eyes at the hospital when Tommy was born, the quiet intimacy of her hand in his during life's small storms. These images warred against the doubts and the anger, reminding him of everything they could still lose. By lunchtime, he wavered between resolve and regret. How far would honesty really take them? Could it mend the cracks or only expose what they'd failed to fix? Meanwhile, Linda paced their living room, her mind turning in tight, anxious circles. Pieces of the past week, John's questions, her confessions, Tommy's quiet watching, looped through her thoughts. She tried to busy herself with chores, but everything felt shallow, as if her world had thinned to a single precious, precarious choice: stay or go. She found herself sitting with a pad of paper and an uncapped pen, making 2 lists. What she loved about John, his patience with Tommy, his crooked half-smile, the way he never let stormy moods win for long, and what she feared, the growing silences, her own failures, the risk that this new honesty might unravel everything. As afternoon faded, Linda heard the familiar jingle of John's keys at the front door. Her heart beat wildly, afraid and hopeful all at once, and unfamiliar. No more pretending. We take it one day at a time. Tommy's laughter echoed from his room, a reminder that life was moving forward, whether they hesitated or not. John drew Linda into his arms, and she rested her head against his shoulder. Their burdens were not lifted, but they were shared, and for now, that was enough. In the gathering dusk, the weight of choices was still heavy but lighter, somehow, for having been spoken. In that quiet, uncertain space, John and Linda took the first genuine breath of something like hope. New light. Tuesday morning broke with a pale golden clarity, sunlight glimmering through the dingy blinds. For the first time in what felt like weeks, the air in the apartment breathed quietly. No sharp edges, no words unsaid. John awoke to find Linda already up, sitting at the kitchen table with her steaming coffee and a gentle look of concentration as she scrolled through job postings on her laptop. The kitchen radio hummed softly, playing an old Motown song that John remembered from their first road trip together. He stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching. Something had shifted. There was a difference in the way Linda balanced her chin on her hand, her ponytail falling loose, her face unguarded in the stream of morning light. It struck John that he hadn't really seen her, the real her, in months. She looked up, meeting his gaze. For a second, neither of them said anything. Then Linda offered a slow, tired smile, and John felt his heart unclench by degrees he hadn't known were even possible. He poured himself a cup of coffee and joined her, the chair scraping the tile. "I'm sorry I shut you out," Linda said. Her voice was low but sure. "For everything." John shook his head. "I'm sorry too. I should have listened sooner. I should have fought harder for us." Instead of just drifting away, a comfortable silence settled between them, punctuated only by the radio and Tommy's shuffling footsteps down the hall. "Are you two okay now?" Tommy asked, his hair sticking up wildly. Linda reached for him, pulling him close. "We're talking again. That's a good start." John knelt to wrap his arms around Tommy, feeling the boy's small heartbeat drumming against his chest. Work, chores, errands. Life picked up where it left off, but stayed softer around the edges. When John came home that night, the three of them cooked dinner together, laughing at Tommy's ridiculous attempts to juggle apples. The shadows on the walls grew gentler with the fading light. Later, as Linda and John stood side by side at the sink, hands bumping, sharing the quiet rhythm of washing dishes, John felt the newness of it all. The careful honesty. The possibility. They weren't perfect. They might never be, but for once, the future felt like something they could shape together, one honest moment at a time. Outside, the city lights blinked on in the dusk, and inside, John caught Linda's hand beneath the warm running water, holding on to hope, as if it were the start of something real. Up Herod John says, unwritten pages. The week unfolded with a cautious, unexpected ease. The heavy silences that had hung between John and Linda began to dissipate, like mist under a strengthening sun. Neither spoke much about the wounds that still lingered in the margins, but their daily moments grew richer with small exchanges of kindness, a hand against a shoulder, a shared smirk over Tommy's homework struggles, a gentle good night that wasn't just a formality. One evening, Linda found herself alone in the living room. Tommy had already gone to bed after an evening of crayons and spaceships, his sleepy, "Love you, Mom," echoing long after the lights flicked off. John was sweeping up in the kitchen. For the first time in a long while, instead of zoning out with her phone, Linda let the quiet settle around her. Old family albums peeked out from the bookshelf. On impulse, she took one down and flipped through the glossy pages. Here was her and John, sunburned and grinning on a long-ago beach vacation. There were blurry photos of Tommy wrapped in a hospital blanket, red-faced and wailing, John leaning in close, a raw mixture of awe and terror on his face. Laughter echoed up from those pages, mingled with anxieties she could barely recall, and joys she had forgotten were possible. Ahead was messy. "We can't change what happened," Linda murmured, "but we get to decide what comes next." He squeezed her gently. "We do, together." The next morning, John was the first to rise. He started coffee and scrambled eggs, humming softly, the scent drifting through the apartment as the early light crept in. Linda joined him, hair tousled and sleep still in her eyes, but she smiled, a real, open smile that made John's heart leap. As the day unfolded, the three of them created new habits. Linda invited John into her worries before they grew too heavy. John let Linda see his struggles, trusting she wouldn't turn away. Tommy, too, seemed lighter, his laughter brighter and more frequent, his drawings now featuring all three of them, hands linked in neon crayon. That night, after Tommy was asleep and the city lights flickered outside their window, Linda pulled out a blank notebook and set it between them. "How about we write down what we dream for the next year? Just little things, nothing big or dramatic, things we hope for us." John grinned and grabbed the pen. "Deal." Side by side on the couch, they began filling those empty pages, not with expectations of perfection, but with the messy, honest hopes that came from choosing each other again. And outside, the world ticked forward, the past unchangeable but forgiven, the future rich with unwritten pages. The shape of tomorrow. Autumn crept quietly across the city, painting the trees in streaks of amber and crimson, the air crisp and scented with distant wood smoke. John found himself pausing on his morning walk to the subway, watching the way leaves tumbled past his feet, reminders of change, of letting go. At home, an unfamiliar sense of anticipation had settled in. Linda seemed lighter now, as if each honest conversation had chipped away the old burdens. Their shared notebook, its pages filling steadily with hopes both large and small, sat on the dining table like a silent touchstone. On a Thursday evening, the three of them decided to try something new. Family game night. It had been years the county fair. Tommy on John's shoulders, Linda holding a stuffed bear. All three faces shining with happiness. Linda set the frame on the tallest shelf, where sunlight would find it each morning. "Let's make new memories for each frame," she said. More than once, John caught Linda reading through their notebook, a smile playing over her lips. "I want to try a painting class," she confessed one night as they settled in for bed. "Just something for myself." "Go for it," John said, pulling her close. "And I'm going to apply for that management course I've been putting off forever." Linda squeezed his hand, understanding in her eyes. "We lost sight of ourselves for a while, didn't we?" He nodded. "But we're finding our way again, and I think we're better for it." As autumn deepened, the family's routines shifted. There were more meals together, more honest talks even on difficult days, more simple joys, a movie night, warm cookies, plans for a trip upstate once the leaves finished turning. On a chilly afternoon, Linda found Tommy bent over a new drawing. He looked up, grinning. "It's us, next year. See, you're painting, Dad's got a book, and I'm making the soccer team." She knelt beside him, her voice soft. "That's a beautiful future, Tommy. I hope we make it true." As the days faded toward winter, John, Linda, and Tommy became a new kind of family. Not perfect, but choosing each other, every day, in small, remarkable ways. The future still held shadows, but now it gleamed at the edges, shaped by hope, honesty, and the belief that ordinary moments could carry them forward. And as they walked together beneath the golden boughs outside their apartment, laughter echoing ahead of them, it seemed, to John, to Linda, and to Tommy alike, that tomorrow could be almost anything they chose.